I'm Lazzurs, and currently I'm working on the DEFRA project in Reading for Kainos with GDS. And I'm over here in Gdansk because the work that we're doing involves teams from multiple parts of Europe. The Gdansk office here is lovely. I've been very impressed by the surrounding area and understand why people want to work and live here. It's absolutely gorgeous here. I love it. The office is beautiful. It's been great meeting the team, and it's fantastic working on a project where we're working across multiple sites and working really well together. Before I joined Kainos, I was working in the ISP industry, primarily in operations and research and development, but I switched from that to come work with Kainos on GDS projects because I'm really excited about automating the future of the UK government, and Kainos really seems to understand how to do that in a very agile way, working very iteratively, and it's been great fun. Great team to work with. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much for turning up. My name's Lazzurs, if you don't know me. Usually referred to as a guy with the bright pink hair. I work on the DEFRA project over in Reading, working with GDS, and it's great fun. I'm here today to give you a perspective on DevOps, but more importantly, how Queen Victoria invented DevOps, which I bet none of you knew. So, does anyone know who this is, other than a random Scotsman? No? Cool, I didn't expect anyone would. The name of this man's Adam Smith, and he was a 19th century philosopher from Scotland. We've got him to thank for many things. Most people would know him for free market theory. We've also got him to thank for roads without tolls, mostly in the UK, because he believed those impeded the market process. And free education, which is very important to us in the UK. The reason behind free education is that you're not going to have a successful economy if the people working in your economy aren't educated. I'm sure all of you being highly educated, highly skilled people here would understand why that's important. But what I've mostly got him to thank for, and why he's relevant to DevOps, is this, automation. And this is pretty much what I've spent my life doing. This is the most important thing to me. I've had various titles, various roles over my career, but realistically, this is the only thing I've ever focused on. And the reason being is Adam Smith told me to. Obviously not directly, I'm not quite that old. He told me to through his books, importantly through an inquiry into the causes of the wealth of nations. The reason Adam Smith felt automation was important is it was the way that we would all have better lives. But most people don't talk about automation. It's kind of a geeky term. A lot of people in business, and certainly in the DEFRA project, will talk about this. We'll talk about industrialized process, and it's certainly more relevant to Adam Smith in Victorian times, in Queen Victoria. Industrialized processes were what were about in his time. So you had people do manual things. Maybe they'd be sewing cloth together, and eventually we had things like sewing machines. Yeah? So people in DEFRA, business people, will talk about this because that's what they were taught at university during their economics classes. Industrialized processes, which is really what we're all here doing, right? But if you're in ops, you're not talking about industrialized processes because you're not thinking about industry. You're not thinking about the person sewing clothes together. You're thinking about configuration management, yeah? And your automation tools, your industrialized process might be done using Puppet or Ansible, Chef, similar tools like this. But if you're a developer, couldn't care less about Puppet or Chef. Your automation is probably in the form of libraries, so you're pulling in other people's work and that's helping automate what you do. You may be using your integrated development environment. That's saving you typing out long function names, yeah? And that's another form of automation. I think development is actually one of the few areas where we don't have a lot of automation. That's why you're all sitting here doing work, because we need a lot of developers, right? If you're a cleaner, this is your automation, yeah? Hoovers. I don't know if any of you have tried to manually clean a carpet, but it's not a fun process. Yeah, you want this type of automation. And this is automation for everyone. This is the automation that really you care about. Because I don't know about you, but I don't like manually cleaning my clothes. You all seem to have clean clothes on here. Yeah, pretty much. Pretty good for developers. So this is the type of automation that everybody cares about, right? And why do we really care about automation? Because this is a life we all want to lead. Yeah? I don't know if anyone's noticed, but cat videos are really popular on the internet. And I would suggest the reason cat videos are really popular on the internet is because we want to be cats. Yeah? They have the most fantastic lives ever. They laze about, They go and eat, they do whatever they want to do. They certainly don't go to work every day. I've occasionally seen cats in offices, but they're certainly not making my coffee. Yeah? And that's what Adam Smith said. He said that whilst we're very industrious people, and we all want to work very hard, we only do it because we're motivated. We have to work. Yeah, we have no choice but to work. You need to work to get clean clothes, to get food. If you were given the choice, if we had full automation, you wouldn't bother working. You'd be a cat. Yeah. And I completely agree. I want to be a cat too one day. And GDS, more importantly, why is automation important to us? Well, GDS are here to provide automation to government. Yeah, they don't just make amazing laptop stickers, although they do, and I think they're very colorful. GDS are here to automate government services. Yeah. Government's a very, very manual thing in the UK. So I don't know how many of you really know about the UK government or UK economy, but we have what's called a mixed market economy. That means that pretty much half of our economic activity is based around the idea that it's going to be run by the public service. Yeah? Most of the people in the UK are employed by the government, doing manual things every day. GDS is here to help change that. Yeah? So all of these government services that we work towards, that people are working on right now, shuffling pieces of paper about, GDS want to turn those into digital services that are fully automated, which is exactly what Queen Victoria and Adam Smith told us to do if we were to have a prosperous economy. And that's roughly the GDS mission. And certainly in the DEFRA project, what we're looking to do is automate out a very manual process where currently farmers, to tell us about their land, print up on Dead Tree a map of their land. They get some big crayons out, they draw on that map and send it into a person. A person looks at it, passes it to another person, goes to Europe. They look at it, and sometimes it's right and sometimes it's wrong because there's so many people involved in the process. Just like if you were manually cleaning your carpet or manually washing your clothes, people make mistakes, yeah? And your clothes aren't going to be properly washed, your carpets aren't going to be properly cleaned, and in the case of the DEFRA project, sometimes mistakes are made, but in the case of the project we're working on, those mistakes are rather expensive. Yeah. So automation, very important. So why do we care about DevOps? You know, automation's the thing, right? The great philosopher that came up with free market theory told us automation's what we want to do. So why do we care about DevOps? Why is that important? Well, so we've been working for lots and lots of years, the hundreds of years since Adam Smith, and we've been improving industrialized processes and figuring out how to work together as companies, and that's been all going very well. Apart from it hasn't. It's been going really terribly. So anyone who's been involved in large projects for any period of time has probably seen this. If you haven't, go have a look, projectcartoon.com, great fun. My favorite part is this. You can't see it on presentation, but in terms of a project, this is what customer described. This is what the customer actually wanted, nice little tree swing. This is how the customer was billed. And that happens a lot of times. And that's not because there's anyone malicious or evil in the process. Adam Smith talked a lot about that. It's much more to do with the fact that talking to people is really difficult. Yeah? Our human communication's awful. It's really terrible at describing concepts, passing ideas from one person to another. And so that's what this cartoon describes. It describes that when one person talks to another, they never properly convey a concept or an idea. Yeah? And so whilst we're all working towards all this automation, we're all talking to each other, and it doesn't really work very well. Yeah? So what do we do to solve that? Well, we'll get in more kilos of DevOps. This is the singular thing about DevOps that annoys me. So a DevOps doesn't exist. There's no such thing. If you take anything away from this presentation and me rambling this afternoon, please let it be the single point. A DevOps is not a thing. You're as likely to find a DevOps as you are one of these. The national animal of Scotland, the unicorn. Yeah? If you think you're going to hire a DevOps, you may as well go and try and hire unicorns. They just don't exist. Let me explain why. So, we'll have roles within the teams that you're in, yeah? Some of you will be developers, some of you work in operations, maybe some of you work in testing or security, project management, business analysis, yeah? So if you imagine each of your roles is a different color. Let's say operations is, I don't know, neon pink. Let's say developers are green, testing's blue. Now, if you wanted a DevOps, someone that does development and operations and all the things, the magic, like the unicorn. If you remember being back at school, you know, and you thought, oh, I want all the colors, so I'll get some green, yeah, I'll put that on. Then I'll get some blue, and put that on. Yeah, I'll get some red, put that on. And so you make this painting, and you've put all the colors in it, and you sort of end up with this, something very brown. Yeah, and if you think that you're going to hire someone that can do all the things, this is pretty accurately what you're going to end up with. You're going to end up with poop on your keyboard. People are good at doing singular things. They're good at becoming specialists. It's again what Adam Smith talked about all those hundreds of years ago. Yeah? People in a free market economy are very good at getting good at something. And no one's good at getting good at everything. So don't try and hire people. Don't try and work with people that are good at everything. Yeah? We're all good at something. That doesn't mean we're good at all the things, though. And that's the most important thing. That's why you can't hire a DevOps. That's why they don't exist. Because as you'll all know from doing your work, you're all good at one thing. Maybe a couple of things, yeah. I'm good at dyeing hair and doing operations. Yeah. So this is what DevOps actually means. It means dev and ops working together. And the reason being, for people who weren't working in the industry during those horrible, horrible days, is that there used to be this big barrier. People talk about working in silos. It was effectively a fight. Yeah, it was horrible. So you had people in operations like myself, who our responsibility was to take code and get it to the customer, make the service, just make it happen. Now as developers, their job was to write code, and there was nothing in between. Yeah, so developers would write code, as I'm sure a lot of you do, and you get that lovely phrase that I hate hearing: "It works on my machine, therefore my job is done." Yeah. Now I still hear the "it works on my machine" part in the DevOps world. But that second part of the phrase has disappeared. Yeah? Therefore, my job is done. Everyone knows that unless we've got a live service, no one's job is done. Yeah? We turned around to GDS and said, well, I wrote the code. Surely my job is done. I don't think they'd be too happy. So what we've got to do is work together. That's what DevOps means. We're here to try and take the code, get it written, make sure that you've got an environment to write it in, make sure you understand exactly what the constraints are in the systems that you're deploying to, so you don't suddenly start writing programs that are going to eat up 32 gig of RAM and really we're just deploying our Raspberry Pi. We need to work together on this. But really, as you'll know from working in your projects, I'm not talking about just dev and ops. You know, it's not just me and some developers delivering a whole solution. You need some security people in there as well, right? You also need some testers, yeah? Because you can write the code, you make sure it's secure, you can test the code, get deployed, hopefully make sure that's secure. That's still not really everything, is it? And you need some people working on the interface as well, because you're going to write some code, you're going to be good at writing code, writing tight algorithms, not using up all the memory. But you're maybe not so good at user interfaces. But there's a problem with this. So probably need some BAs and some project managers, but it doesn't really fit on a slide, and so you can't really talk about it, yeah? And that's why it's called DevOps, rather than DevSec, test, interface, BA, project manager, ops, because that just wouldn't work, yeah? And so it's not an omission of those roles, and it's not that any one is more or less important than the other in the multidisciplinary teams that we all work in. It's just that that fits on a slide, it's easy to say, right? And so when we're talking about DevOps, what we're really talking about, if you go back to thinking about the colors, the paints, you know, if you want to get some developers that are blue and some ops that are pink and some testers that are green, what we're talking about is a spectrum. This is the way I like to think about DevOps. So if you think about those individual blocks of color, they are one color, yeah? So as a developer, if you're green or you're blue, and your operations are pink, spectrums are they show you the gap between those colors. Yeah. So as an operations engineer, I occasionally need to look at some code. Yeah. As a tester, occasionally I need to look at the systems. It's not about understanding what the roles of each individual other person does, but it's about being a little bit more understanding, about working together. Yeah. DevOps isn't about being a specific thing. It's about understanding that other people in your teams are also doing something and trying to work together with them. It's not really all that difficult. And so it comes back to this. DevOps isn't a thing you can hire. It's not something you can buy. It's not a tool. There are tools that we can use to help DevOps, yeah? So in terms of ops, helping that spectrum, what we do is we use Puppet, for instance. Yeah? So that turns our systems configuration, it turns what we do into code. Yeah? So suddenly we're treating systems, we're treating ops as code, and occasionally on our project, sometimes the developers edit that code. Yeah? It's the same with automated testing now. Our automated testing, what used to be a manual process, and certainly in the project we work in sometimes is, that testing for the most part is code. So again, developers can work on it. There's a nice common base. There's domain-specific languages. Yeah. Same with security testing. That's just about getting to the point where it's fully automated too now. And you're getting domain-specific languages to do your security testing, so operations can look at security testing, developers can look at security testing. We can all work together on these things. DevOps isn't a thing, it's a philosophy. And that's why I started talking about one of the world's most famous philosophers. Yeah. DevOps is an idea, it's a concept, it's not something you're going to hire. Yeah. So if you take away any second thing from the talk, please let it be this, that there is no single DevOps, there is nothing you can buy, it's just an idea, it's a concept, it's a philosophy, it's a way of working, it's what you should be doing every day. Okay? And that's pretty much me, I'm done. Any questions? Apart from being called a DevOps or talking about DevOps team, what challenges do I face in operations working with developers? What I talk about is recently. We launched our service into production, as you'll know. And production, on our project, we've actually got multiple ops teams. And so the ops team that was providing us the production systems weren't really maybe as clear. They haven't been really working to DevOps very well, working with us. And so we didn't understand the constraints as to what was in production. And so the challenges I've probably faced recently are getting those constraints along to everyone. So getting everyone to understand what the constraints in productions are, and our production environment is. Yeah. In terms of our project, I've been really blessed in this project. I can't say that we've had much friction between teams. It's all very smooth. You know, so as you'll know, in each Scrum team, there's an operation teams member in there. Yeah, so you've got DevOps is pretty much happening pretty well. In the past, what I can say, however, some of the companies I've worked at, the friction you've ended up with basically means that as developers write code and hand it to operations, if operations don't say it works, they just don't do anything with it. And so you end up with services getting delayed and not deployed. Yeah. Or operations not caring because they say the systems work. That's where we were in the past. These days it's much easier. Yeah. Does that answer your question part?
How would you describe the current situation in the project and where you want to be in the future?
So how would I describe the current situation project and where we want to get to?
Maybe not only DEFRA, but Kainos-wide.
Kainos-wide.
IT-wide.
Maybe IT-wide. Okay, well, I'll answer all three. So on the project, I think we're doing really well in terms of in Kainos, right? So within Kainos' little bubble in our project, we're doing fantastically. As a project as a whole, we're doing terribly, which is, like, it's not a great thing to say, but it's true. So within the project we're all working on right now, there are 3 main delivery bodies. The 2 other delivery bodies, one of them doesn't have any ops at all. It's throwing code over the wall and expecting it magically to end up as a service that people can actually use. That's maybe not good. There's the other delivery body which, okay, they got in some ops recently after being pushed really hard, but, well, their ops wants to sit in a little bubble. They're from that sort of old horrible phase of ops where they don't really care about anyone else. And so the challenges we face on that project right now are trying to integrate or spread DevOps as a philosophy to everyone. Yeah? And part of the problem is what I discussed about here. People think, oh, well, I've got a DevOps problem. Someone came in and said, I've got a DevOps problem, so I'll hire a DevOps. I'll get more kilos of DevOps in. And that doesn't really work. What you need to do is somehow enforce that philosophy, that idea of working together to create that spectrum. Yeah? And that's the difficulties on the current project. Within Kainos, I think our singular problem is what I've tried to get across here with this talk. Our problem isn't that ops and dev and test and sec don't work together well in projects. Kainos is great at that. Everyone's so passionate within Kainos. They really seem to care about delivering whatever it is that the customer wants. So that's working really well. The only thing I'd say that's maybe not quite as good as it would want to be is we've got job adverts up for people, for DevOps people. That's bad. Yeah, that's bad for two reasons. One, it means we're trying to hire unicorns. Won't work. Two, the people that actually understand what DevOps is are going to look at that and go, well, okay, I know DevOps and I know what it is. I'm an operations guy, or I'm a developer or someone else, and I like working in DevOps teams, but they don't understand it. And that's not true. We do. We really do. Kainos gets it, but it occasionally, only occasionally, looks to the outside world like we don't on job postings. So if we could fix that, if that'd be the one outcome of this talk, you know, that'd be fantastic. That'd be great. In the wider industry, it's again getting away from that thing that people should work in DevOps. So part of how I ended up here is I knew that DevOps was a current buzzword, like cloud was a couple of years ago and e-commerce was a long time ago. And so I knew if I put my LinkedIn DevOps, I'd get recruiters just jumping on top of me. And I'd get my pick of projects, and I did. Yeah, and that worked really well, embarrassingly well. But that's kind of bad. That's not good, you know. I tried to mitigate that by saying I was a DevOps geek rather than I'm a DevOps, but it's still not good. So that's what I've fixed in the industry as well. Stop trying to hire cloud experts. Hire experts in deploying systems. Stop trying to hire DevOps. You know, hire operations people that understand DevOps. I think it should be the top of the requirements list for your developers, for your testers, for your operations people, for your security people, is that they understand DevOps. But I don't think it should be a job title. If we've got a job title or a team named DevOps, failed. Yeah, yeah, Stefan.
What is the good background of people to be successful ops? Like, you know, what do they need to have? You know, how one can become a weird heritage?
So I really like a company called Etsy. I don't know if anyone's aware. I'll repeat your question first though. You asked, what would be the background of someone who's good in operations, yes? Yeah. So there's a company named Etsy. They're a sort of online marketplace. What they do isn't important, but they are fantastic at operations. Almost as good as we are. They're really good. So if you have a look at what they look for in operations, first off, they couldn't care how you look. They've actually got an anti-beard policy. So I'd actually find it more difficult to get a job on Etsy. Doesn't matter how a person looks. It depends at the level you're hiring at. So if you're hiring junior people, honestly, it wouldn't really matter. As long as they're really passionate about computers. Whenever I'm trying to hire operations people, I'm looking for tinkerers. One of the most important questions I ask is, what have you got set up at home? So in the past sort of 10, 15 years when I've been doing this, most of the setups that end up in production, I've probably got at home first. Yeah? The monitoring systems I use at home are now in several ISPs. The network management systems for firewalls that I've used end up at several ISPs. It's about being passionate. It's about being geeky, about wanting to tinker and play with things. If I was looking for operations people, I'd want to know what it is they're doing, what interesting projects have they played with. There's a current fashion to look at, say, people's GitHub profiles. I'm not too fond of that because not everyone works in open source. And there are some very serious barriers to entry in the open source world, which some have recently arisen, some which are historical. It's not easy for everyone to get into having a great GitHub profile. I'd actually try and not ever Google someone's name until I've hired them. Just look for someone in the junior level that's really interesting. For the senior level, other than a great beard, I'd look for someone that has a track record of working with other people. Because you'll be able to see from the projects I've worked on and whether those services are up or not right now as to whether they're actually good at operations. So that's the easy part for senior people. You know if they're going to be good at doing operations. It then comes into the philosophy of how they work with other teams. Are they able to work with developers? You know, have they got a great story as to a time where, you know, them and the security guy sat down and hammered out a really serious security issue because their systems got rooted. Yeah? I'd also look for failure. I think the most important trait of any senior person, but especially in operations, is handling failure. Having had failure, having dealt with failure and learned from failure. Yeah? So one of my worst fails was an ISP I worked at got rooted. That's pretty bad. So that means that all their systems got compromised. What was worse was we were hosting the site of a major children's charity, and the people who had compromised their systems put on an auto refresh on the page that redirected the page automatically. So you visit this charity site, you get automatically redirected to an adult site. Doesn't get worse than that. I mean, you can't imagine a worse, I have not had a worse day in my life, I don't think. Yeah, having that charity phone up, lovely people, and say, hi, something seems to be wrong. We don't know if it's our computers, our website's redirecting to this. That was pretty terrible. There's all sorts of things I would say that, oh, well, this and that. That was a horrible day. But dealing with that, the things I've learned since about what you do and don't put live, how you apply updates. One of the things I hammer across to a team constantly is apply updates. Yeah, and that really was, that compromise was a simple matter of too many systems, not enough people, we didn't apply updates to them. We had no testing of the updates, so we didn't know they would break things. So people were scared of applying them. So I've learned from that you have systems which you can test your updates on. You apply them frequently. Yeah. That was horrible. That's what I'd look for. Someone that can admit to failure as well. Failure happens constantly, but if you can't put your hand up and say, I failed, I reinstalled that customer server and now their data's gone, or I didn't apply that update and so that's probably how they got in, you're going to spend a lot of time trying to figure that out, and the person really at that point isn't of any use to you. Yeah.
Thanks, Rob.
No problem. Anyone else? Any more questions?
What is the difference between the DevOps work and WebOps?
What is the difference, so repeat your question, what is the difference between
DevOps and WebOps?
What is the difference between DevOps and WebOps?
Yeah.
Okay. WebOps is a discipline, so you can be hired to do WebOps. Web operations generally means running the operational systems of internet-facing systems. And that's generally what we have on the DevOps project because we're creating a web application. So we have people who do WebOps. Yeah. Some people, if you're talking about, say, ISPs, they would talk about SysOps, so systems operations, or if they're network-specific people, they would talk about NetOps. DevOps, on the other hand, that's just a way of working. So that's a way of the WebOps people working with the developers, with the testers. That would be the difference. Okay, so Piot behind you, for instance, he's WebOps. Yeah, I'm WebOps. You developer or? Sorry? Oh, you're SysOps then. You're running systems, right? Traditionally, you'd probably be called a systems administrator, I guess. Is that, yeah. So generally, I think these days, a more modern term would be systems operations engineer or SysOps. Yeah. Because everyone likes short things. They found presentations. Yep. Cool. Any more? Please do ask now. No? Okay, well, thank you very much for letting me take up your time. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, everyone.